We're now going to have a panel discussion. I'd like to welcome Natalia Meza, who's a biobusiness specialist at BIOFIN from the United Nations Development Programme. Good to see you.
Good morning from Latin America. Good afternoon for you people.
I was going to ask the panel is really, if you could just say in a couple of minutes, what's been your involvement in funding or helping researchers to obtain funding for local production of diagnostics? And so, Natalia, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot, Dr. Malloy and team, for the invitation. It's a pleasure being here today to share our experience in Costa Rica. In UNDP, which stands for UNDP is the United Nations Development Programme. In UNDP Costa Rica, we created in record time, in fact, a specific project to support innovation related to COVID-19 pandemic. And this allowed us to give a grant to the National Center of Biotechnological Innovation, CENBIO. And with this, we also support the research to develop an in-house protocol for COVID-19 diagnosis. So this experience is completely unusual for us, especially considering that UNDP is a United Nations agency that is focused on sustainable development. And it doesn't have a specific mandate related to public health. We work on sustainable development. However, as people and as organization, I will say that we ran the extra mile to use a window of opportunity and mobilize internal UNDP funds that were originally available to catalyze SDGs acceleration. So we allocated funding for the first stage of research, and that enabled us to finance a second stage with government funds. And that was also possible because we have a team with strong technical skills related to biotechnology and molecular biology working for the Biodiversity Finance Initiative, which is a project that in fact works in biodiversity. So we took advantage of this academic background of the team to create a complete internal cooperation project in less than a week. And that is how this project was born. As a result, our partner, CENBIO, developed an in-house protocol for nucleic acid extraction and detection. The Costa Rican protocol uses vacuum plates and magnetic beads to reduce dependence on commercial kits and lower the cost of each analysis. This is a kind of methodology that in fact can be widely replicated in laboratories with basic equipment. So that is the summary of our experience, Dr. Malloy.
Great, thanks, Natalia. And so the aim of this was just to really have a conversation about kind of what motivated that support, and in terms of maybe from UNDP, but also from the people you've been talking with, what do you feel is the kind of vision for the future of local production in Costa Rica at the moment? I mean, is it something that's being discussed? Is it something that has a vision, or is it very much a sort of piecemeal environment?
So first of all, I have to say that being an UN agency, our main motivation is clear, is leave no one behind. Maybe you already heard about it. And as you already know, Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, are part of a global agenda for 2030. However, this pandemic is widening gaps and hitting the most vulnerable people. So as UNDP, we understand that COVID-19 is a crisis and has sanitary and economic effects on a global scale. And it is also putting a risk reaching the SDG for everyone, everywhere. Well, that is, first of all, the framework of motivation for this specific work. We understand also that diagnosis is the first step to understand them, to prioritize and act in managing any epidemiologic event. So strengthening capacities at country level is mandatory to confront the pandemic. Besides, as UNDP, we invested a little bit of budget that puts lots of faith in research and development of an open access protocol for diagnosis, with the vision of sharing and transferring accessible technology to less developed countries inside Latin America or whatever is needed. And I have to say that our vision for the next years goes beyond COVID-19 diagnosis. In fact, we imagine a future where scientists and policymakers work closer together. And that was a central part of our experience with CENBIO. In fact, at BIOFIN, which is a biodiversity finance initiative for UNDP that works in more than 40 countries, and we aim to close the finance gap for biodiversity, we developed financial solutions to mobilize funding for bioeconomy, innovation, and biotechnology, but for projects that has approved a concept of use biodiversity in a sustainable way. So we use our experience, collaboration, and our existing platform of collaboration with the Ministry of Science and Technology to prioritize how to support Costa Rica during this crisis. That is the kind of future that I would like to imagine. Government, academia, and international cooperation working together to create value from science and national expertise. And definitely that goes beyond COVID-19 diagnosis.
Fantastic. And I wonder if it's an accident that you came almost at this more from the biodiversity side of things and thinking rather from the biotech, biopharma side of things. I think there's sort of maybe different ways of addressing some of these collaboration setups that yeah, gave you a different perspective as you came into this, which is really fascinating. What recommendations would you have for researchers and innovators, which are the primary audience of the RICA community, to engage with funders, I guess specifically in the case of UNDP, kind of intergovernmental organizations and civil society to kind of move towards that vision you've just described, the things that we could be doing to get this on the agenda and to have conversations with organizations like yours?
I would say that I have two main recommendations. First of all, build bridges. That means working outside of research dimension and include government and policy makers as well as part of the network. In our case, BIOFIN started working with the Ministry of Science and Technology to support bioeconomy and mobilize also funding for bioenterprises and innovation in biotechnology. But on the other hand, Dr. Natalia, that also is here in the call, and director from CENIBIOT, he had their own communication channel with our Ministry of Science, and also he participated in the advisory board of the Ministry of Health. So we have the pieces of the puzzle and a network with common partners to start working in junction. In our case, I will say that the stars were aligned, but building bridges with new partners is part of the equation for success, especially even when we are talking about innovation and resilience that are mandatory to tackle global challenge as the pandemic. And the second recommendation will be communication. Researchers, and you know that, talk normally peer-to-peer in their own stratosphere of knowledge. And policymakers do the same. They speak in their own kind of language and also move again in their own stratosphere of knowledge. So we have two different dimensions with few common entry points at first sight. And I know it feels great when you really love to talk about what are you doing in the lab, but we need to hit land again and come back from our stratosphere of knowledge to communicate in a better way. And this means also finding a way to explain which everybody can understand. For me, that is the concept of being a real genius. Explain the knowledge that may require a PhD to discover, but in a way that even a 5-year-old child could understand. And that is a skill that is rare in academia, especially when we just use scientific papers to spread ideas. And let's face it, we need to change that. In our experience in Costa Rica, our BIOFIN team assumed the role of being interpreters of scientific language to create our framework of cooperation. It wasn't difficult to advocate for CENIBIOT once our team understood that the proposal made a lot of sense. In fact, to explain this, we didn't have to give a lecture of molecular biology 101. Instead of that, our advocacy started with an example of cooking and food. And this is the idea that we used. Dependence on commercial kits for diagnosis is like depending on instant soup for your dinner. It could be quicker and easier, but always is a good idea having a home recipe from scratch, just in case of commercial instant soup, or in this case, commercial kits for the diagnosis will be unavailable. So we just found out a way to explain the main concept behind our project in Costa Rica, and that is that we need to promote resilience and give alternatives to maintain diagnosis capacities, even when the whole world is demanding the same reagents. So I think that those are my two main recommendations. Remember to build bridges, networking, and communicate as simple as possible. That is the real heart of advocacy.
That's really great. I really love the food analogy because I think there's actually a book which was shared with me by someone who works in a completely different area, but when I was describing what I was working on in terms of local production, and the name escapes me, but it's basically like make or buy. So for different food ingredients, what's worth making from scratch at home and what do you want to buy in? And I think it's that kind of, you can get a long way with that analogy in terms of sometimes it's just not the best thing to kind of make the really, really tricky, no one's going to make flour themselves necessarily because you need a mill and you need all of these other things. But you can, there's a lot of mileage in kind of putting together things like kits, for example, we were talking about before. Like you can kind of make stages. You don't have to go from sort of buying everything from the supermarket to baking bread, starting with wheat from the fields. Sort of, I think there's quite a nice local production manufacturing analogy you can bring out. So I will link to the book on the chat later. So it looks like, unfortunately, we've had some kind of crossed wires. And I wonder if, I'm going to put him on the spot now, but the purpose of this panel was really to get the kind of perspectives from organizations that were supporting or funding or attempting to fund local production activities. But Randall, maybe you could speak a little bit as a researcher as to how you found this whole process and kind of, did you learn ways that you needed to communicate either with Natalia and her colleagues at UNDP, or I know you were also in conversations with the Costa Rican government as well. Like, what's your reflection on that as a researcher in terms of things others could learn from?
Hi, Jenny. Hi, Natalia. Good to see you again. And hi, everyone. Well, I mean, we're Rat Labs, right? And before last year, we were just happy doing our experiments. And all of a sudden, we're in the press, talking to the government, talking to international cooperations, such as UNDP, and everything changed, like how you approach the press, even political things that now I understand, right? But it's politics. So some people are gonna be happy with the government, some people are not. If you go to the press and say you're gonna do something with the government, there's gonna be somebody who is not happy with it and is gonna say something against it. And it was quite shocking for me at the time, like to see I'm trying to do something good here, I'm trying to develop something just in case it's needed in the country. And there's people talking negatively about it. So I guess that part, the communication part, the part of getting out of the lab and actually being able to get together in a table with people from all the scope of people making decisions and contributing solutions to a big problem was the biggest learning experience I had through all of this, right? Because the lab work, even though we never did anything for COVID or diagnosis, I mean, we are users of molecular biology techniques, not makers, right? We never produced anything like it. We just used it and bought it from a catalog. But at the end, it's science, right? You just apply what you know. Sooner or later, you're going to come out with an answer. But being able to convince people and bring everybody together to the table and being able to explain why this solution and that other solution to a person who is actually making decisions but who doesn't understand anything about science. That's something that I really learned from. And honestly, I'm still trying to improve my skills. Even looking for training courses on how to speak to the press, how to deliver messages for a broad audience. Because now I understand it's important getting out of the lab and being able to communicate and convince people of the work they're doing. So that part, that communication part, is the biggest single biggest learning I had, and I would recommend everybody in this forum, because everybody here, because I'm assuming, and I guess I'm right, that everybody who is here, the 19 participants right now, and 20 plus or 30 plus earlier on, we all are here because we want to make a change, because we want to make technology available to many people, because we want to distribute and be sure that technology goes to the people who need it, the tools that we develop actually work and do some good for somebody. But in order to do that, not only you have to create the science or the solutions, you have to be able to communicate that solution to somebody else. And that communication part is, I won't get tired of emphasizing that one.
Fantastic. It's a really useful reflection, I think, and echoes part of the reason for running this session today and having Sharon and Meredith involved to sort of give us some of those communication tools, particularly, I mean, there's different styles of communication, and kind of advocating for something is a particular style of communication that we don't often get introduced to very much as researchers. We have about 5 minutes before Fanan is going to take it home with some wrapping up remarks from the meeting. So would anyone have questions for Natalia or Randall, either about the initiative that they were involved in Costa Rica, or anything else regarding some of these, or maybe you want to share your own reflections on work that happened in your own environments and communities? Please just raise your hand, or you can also write a note in the chat as well. Keith, go ahead.
I had maybe a naive question, but we've managed to build some connections with the local government, but we don't seem to have built any connections with any international organization like WHO, PATH, these larger organizations, Gates, that really have the money, because the Philippine government have been very supportive of us, but we talk in tiny numbers relative to anywhere else in the world. Which is the easiest international, this is a very vacuous question, but which is the easiest international organization do you think that we could engage that would be sort of receptive to the sorts of things that everyone here on the call is, like Randall says, we're all here for the same reason, no? Which is the most receptive organization do you think that we should try first? Tough question, no?
A little bit. I will say that it depends a lot on the country, because any UN organization or cooperation, international cooperation organization works by their own. In fact, we work based on the country priorities. So that is because I like to emphasize the communication channel of Randall with the Ministry of Science and Technology. Because for us, we are not going to network directly. That is kind of weird, trying to work directly with private organization or directly with academia without having a framework of government of public policy. So I will say that the key point is trying to talk to your government authorities, trying to have that channel of communication. Because in our case, I said that it was completely neutral. So our work, because we are an agency that we don't work directly in public health. However, that is going to depend a lot on each country priorities. And the reason behind I really emphasis in the relationship with the Ministry of Science and Technology is because for us as UNDP also is new. It's a completely new and innovative partnership. And we have this relationship because we started working with bioeconomy, supporting the National Bioeconomy Strategy. So I know that currently UNDP manages funds for support green recovery from economic crisis. That is what are we doing in a lot of other countries. However, in some countries, I know that also UNDP bought equipment of materials for laboratories. And in any case, it always responds to government necessities. So I will say that the door or the window that you have to use is throughout the government authorities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. I think also don't underestimate the power of the individual in some of these organizations as well. I mean, my experience has been that the organizations certainly do have their own scope, and like figuring out where those boundaries are is really important, because you can guarantee that they will not step outside of that scope. Having said that, within organizations, there are individuals who will skirt the edges of the scope more than others, and sort of having someone who's a real kind of champion within some of those organizations is extremely important, and who's willing to kind of, you know, sit and have an open conversation. And yeah, that's kind of invaluable, because we're all people talking in a room at the end of the day most often. So yeah, it's a challenge. I think also just understanding, you know, where people, so Sharon mentioned development banks earlier, and they would seem like obvious candidates to provide larger scale funding for stuff like this, but actually they really provide massive scale funding. So in order to have a project that is fundable by a development bank, I mean, they're really talking like $50 million and above at the smaller end of what they would consider funding. And so one of the challenges for local manufacturers of diagnostics is that often the type of investment they need falls into this kind of gap where it's too large for government funding, or kind of, you know, organizations like UNDP, local branches, or other, you know, organizations that would give you seed funding, proof of concept funding, a little bit of early stage commercialization, but it's nowhere near big enough for a development bank to step in. It's usually kind of in that middle ground, and it seems like getting funding for the sort of, you know, $2 to $10 million is really tough, or like 1 to 10 even, is kind of, you're too small for the big guys, but you're too big for everybody else. And so yeah, the sort of for funding specifically, I think it's a difficult line to tread. So I'm afraid we don't have more time for discussion, but thank you so much, Randall, for stepping up unexpectedly and being such a good sport and giving us some really great insight into your learnings, and for Natalia for presenting that excellent vision. And I really hope that the partnership in Costa Rica can kind of, you know, continue to flourish. And I know it's been a challenge, Randall, and it remains an ongoing kind of you know, challenge to move these initiatives forward, and I think we've all experienced that. So thanks for your persistence and everything that's happening there. It's a really good kind of example of what seems like a very functioning and healthy partnership. So that's great. We're going to wrap up now with a few words from Fanan, and then the formal meeting will end. So we will go back to we'll unspotlight everybody and go back to our group. Fanan will give the wrap up, and then you can leave. It is the formal end of the meeting, so you can carry on with your days. If you'd like to stay behind, we're going to open breakout rooms that are organized by region. So we thought it might be nice, having taken on some of these tools for advocacy, even if we don't call it advocacy when we're talking to government officials, as recommended by Sharon Ann, you can talk about how you might apply those tools together in your respective regions. We thought a little bit about how to slice this up, and although you know, we all have a common vision, that a lot of the political will and the funding is still quite regionally segregated. So we thought that was most useful for the theme of the Reclone Symposium today. Before I hand over to Fanan for closing remarks, I will just say we'll plan to run another symposium probably in the course of the next 2 to 3 months. We would like to run it on an Asia Pacific time zone, because we have not done that so far, and Keith's staying up really late and there are others who I'm sure would have joined if they could. So if anybody is interested in co-convening in Asia Pacific time zone, it doesn't mean we only have people from Asia Pacific speaking, but it will be weighted, I would imagine. Do reach out to myself or Barbara and let us know, and we'll bring you in on some planning meetings for that. Now over to Fanan for a quick wrap up, and then we'll have the breakout rooms ready for you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you all. My name is Fernán Federici. I'm in Chile, working in the university. I'm a member of the Reclone network, a friend and collaborator of the Open Bioeconomy Lab. And I've been lucky to meet and know and learn from at least half of the people presenting today here in different open technologies movements. I would like to thank all the speakers and attendees, and for all the ideas and progress and views being shared here today. It has been very inspiring to see how observing this transition from how to go from the technical bottlenecks and how we all share protocols and ideas on how to do things and diagnostics, now to this higher level complexity on how to basically get this beyond the hard work at bench, and how to get this making an impact out there. And as Sharon mentioned, we are at the tipping point and a very extraordinary time a special time to take advantages and review the whole process of technology transfer and how we organize our funding and how the technology is made to society is a great chance. So I think personally that these sort of meetings are extremely useful and encouraging. I don't want to take a lot of time from you, so I will go straight to the main message for us, that is, please go to the forum of the Reclone Forum and share your views, links, and other information that you think is important for the network. Share your protocols at protocols.io. That is the place where we are collecting all the protocols for producing all the diagnostics, reagents for research and for education too. And please propose speakers and invite new people to join the network and this series of meetings, so we can engage more people and learn more from a lot of groups and people already working on all these different fronts, and we can learn from them. With that, I would like to say thank you very much to all of you, and I think we will go now to the breakout sessions for those staying longer. Thank you very much.